You've probably seen the clips. Grown men sprinting into stores, yelling about restocks like they're on the stock market floor. Some even knocking over displays just to get their hands on that new $60 box of shining cardboard. Maybe you've seen the news stories about break-ins at game shops, smashing up cabinets, breaking through windows just to end up stealing some steam cheese bulk. But that's not what this video is all about. This is about before all of that. I want to take you guys back to 1999.
I'm Ash from the town of Pallet. I declare to the Pokemon of the world, I will be the greatest Pokemon master of all time!
Pokemon 150, no.
It's a Saturday morning. Got a couple of mates over after a sleepover, half a bowl of cereal going soggy on the desk next to you. The TV's on, whether you're watching Cheese TV in Australia or Kids WB in America. Life is simple. Your mum calls out saying that you're all going to head down to the shops. Are you going to go to Target, GameStop, maybe even Toys R Us if you're lucky? You wander into the store, past the Game Boy Color displays and the big bins of plastic action figures. Something catches your eye. Packs of Pokemon cards like they appeared from another world. You grab one, or at least you crack the shits until your mum finally grabs one for you. In that moment, whether you pulled a Caterpie or a Holo Zapdos, it really didn't matter. The spell was already cast. And whether you knew it or not, that moment then would help shape the next 25 years of your life. Base set launched in January 1999 and booster boxes vanished fast. The recommended retail price was roughly $90, but parents quickly gobbled up the supply so their kids wouldn't be the only ones at school without some cards. Anyone around at the time would know that the product range was quite confusing and you didn't really know what you got and what the best bang for your buck was. You had the regular booster packs featuring Charizard, Blastoise and Venusaur artwork, the theme decks in Brushfire, Zap, Overgrowth and Blackout. You could have also got the 2-player starter kit, the starter gift box, or if your parents really wanted you off their backs, they could have brought you the entire booster box. What was more important was what was in the packs. Inside they had fan favourites like Pikachu, Charizard, Blastoise and Venusaur. The original base set had already stole our hearts on the Game Boy screens or in the cereal box promos, but now you could trade them at recess or flip them at lunch, or just stare at the Holo Machamp under the sunlight like it was actual magic. At the time, there was no app, no algorithm, or Pokemon inflation yet, it was just pure passion. Even commons like Bulbasaur, Squirtle, or Charmander were some kids' prized possessions at the time. But then, just as kids were wondering whether to save up for Nidoking or a Mewtwo, Pokemon decided to change up the game a little bit and release its next set. After base set exploded like a critical hit from Hyper Beam, Jungle arrived in June 1999, and it brought reinforcements. Once again, there was 3 pack arts. There was Wigglytuff, who looked like they were going to a bake sale and somehow ended up on the front of a pack. Flareon, who just looked like an Instagram influencer. Scyther, who was just a praying mantis with knives taped to its arms. And inside, brilliance. You had the Krispy Kreme machine in Snorlax, Pidgeot looked absolutely majestic, and Electro just looked as pissed off as always. Pulling the holos was only half the fun. The real madness happened at the playground. You know, every playground became a stock market floor. Someone's cousin in Japan swore that Venomoth was ultra rare because it glows under black light. Another kid claimed that Wigglytuff could sing you to sleep in real life if you stared at it long enough. And I remember when someone tried to swap a Butterfree for a Game Boy, and they said it was a misprint because the wings are kind of weird. And how could we forget about the evolutions? You had Vaporeon, Jolteon, and Flareon. If you had all 3 in your binder, you were done trading. You'd already transcended. You're on a pokey tax bracket above everyone else. And if you were around at the time, I'm sure you can remember fighting constantly with your mates about who was the best evolution. Jungle wasn't just an expansion, it was a flex, a fever dream, and a foil ticket to an instant schoolyard clout. And just when it seemed like it couldn't get more intense, we have the next set.
Behind these doors is a place 2 million years in the Pokemon past.
By October 1999, Pokemon Mania was less a hobby and more of a national emergency. Stores were selling out, new segments were warning parents about trading card addictions, and just as the base set rush and the jungle stampede were cooling slightly, boom, here comes Fossil. Fossil leaned into that fossilized prehistoric theme and was a little darker and a bit more mysterious than the two predecessors in Base and Jungle. The cards just didn't feel rare, they felt ancient, like they'd just been unearthed and put into a booster pack. And talking about the booster packs, once again we had 3 pack arts. You had Lapras, Aerodactyl, and Zapdos. But we also had 2 theme decks in Bodyguard, which had a Muck, and Lockdown, which had a Lapras inside of it. But the real heat came from the handful of standout cards. Gengar was now a personality trait for kids around the world. Dragonite, which was the first card I ever had that the adults around me said, oh, that's nice. And then Articuno, who just elegant is the only word I could use. And of course, with only 62 cards in the set, trading up for that Gengar required a bit of ingenuity. Whether that was 13 Slowpokes or 14 Geodudes, you got the job done. And for the hobby overall, the last 2 sets in Jungle and Fossil weren't just filler sets. They were like pouring gasoline on an already lit fire in base set. But coming up next in the 2000s, the story is a little bit different. Released in February 2000, Base Set 2 was a bit of a strange unit in the timeline. It wasn't a new set, it wasn't even pretending to be. This was Base Set plus Jungle, reheated, then sent back out the door with a 2 stamped on it like it was a sequel that no one really wanted. Let's be honest though, this was Wizards of the Coast looking around the warehouse, seeing a stack of existing artwork saying, hey, you guys still like Charizard, right? There was no new cards, no new mechanics, no surprises, just the same hits and same duds. But now slightly with more swooshy background and a logo that looked like clip art from PowerPoint. It was a brilliant marketing move, really. Reuse the same cards, slap a 2 on it, and then profit. Retailers loved it, Wizards loved it, parents didn't even know the difference, and for collectors, well, it was a new set that technically had Charizard in it, so to this day, Base Set 2 is the Pokemon equivalent of those special edition DVDs that were just the same movie with a silver case. Thankfully, after this slightly disappointing experiment in Pokemon, in my opinion, Wizards came out swinging with their next set. Team Rocket came out in April 2000, and suddenly things got shady. The bright, innocent vibes of Base, Jungle, and Fossil completely gone. Team Rocket rolled up like a moody teen who just discovered heavy eyeliner in Linkin Park. This was the first time in the TCG where they leaned into the dark side. Enter Dark Pokemon. You had Dark Charizard, Dark Dragonite, and Dark Alakazam. They weren't evil exactly, but they looked like they'd definitely steal your lunch money at school. They weren't happy forest creatures, these were shadowy, rebellious versions of your favourites, and they looked amazing. Let's talk about some of the other artwork. You had Dark Gyarados, that looked like he just took out a fishing village. Dark Blastoise was mid-rampage, and even the commons had an edge, like Rattata looked mean, Drowsy looked like it knew something about you that you didn't want it to, and then there was even trainer cards like Rocket Sneak Attack, which made it very clear, these people do not play fair. Even the booster packs were sleek and dangerous looking, mostly black with Giovanni's gang staring at you like you wandered into the wrong part of Pallet Town. While the gameplay changes were relatively tame, the vibe shift was massive. This set told a story, one that wasn't about gym badges or friendship, it was about doing whatever it took to win. Team Rocket was the turning point, and the first time in the Pokemon TCG where it showed that it could be stylish, thematic, and a little bit dangerous. It proved the game could grow up just a little bit without losing its heart. But just as we were adjusting our trench coats and quoting prepare for trouble, Pokemon pivoted hard. They said, forget the villains, what if you're a gym leader? Gym Heroes dropped in August 2000 and Gym Challenge followed closely in October. 2 sets, 2 months, 0 time to wait. Up until now, every card set had been about the Pokemon themselves, but this 2-part expansion flipped the script. Now it was about who trained them. Lieutenant Surge, Misty, Sabrina, Blaine, all those gym leaders you battled on your Game Boy were suddenly handing you their business cards in holo form. Instead of Arcanine, it was Blaine's Arcanine. Instead of Magneton, it was Lieutenant Surge's Magneton. Suddenly, you weren't just playing a Pokemon deck, you were cosplaying as a gym leader. If you want to run a Misty Starmie, you better have a Misty on your bench. It added layers of strategy and arguments and, oh my god, so many arguments. And the art, gym era art went hard. You had Sabrina's Gengar, who looked like it was mid-exorcism, and Blaine's Charizard looked like it came out of a speed metal album, and it was just fire and chaos. And then there was Rocket Zapdos, half bird, half malfunctioning air fryer. Even the booster packs hit differently. You had close-ups of the gym leaders looking way too intense for 5th graders to process, Brock staring into your soul, or Sabrina daring you to open the pack like it might be cursed. Gym Heroes and Gym Challenge weren't just sets. They were identity kits for kids who wanted to be more than just another Pikachu fan. They paved the way for a whole new adventure, which was very timely because we're heading out of Kanto now. The Game Boy Color had turned gold and silver, and the cards were following suit. By the end of 2000, the Pokemon TCG had done it all. We'd been through Jungle Fever, Fossil Excavations, gym battles, and full-on villain arcs, so where could we possibly go next? Well, let's jump on a train or go on a Johto. This was the TCG's version of a soft reboot. We had a new Pokedex, new energy, and new cards to bend in your lunchbox. Neo Genesis dropped in December 2000, just in time for every parent to panic buy the wrong theme deck for Christmas. And this wasn't just a new set, this was a whole new generation. Johto starters were Chikorita, Cyndaquil, and Totodile, or as most kids in my school referred to them as not Bulbasaur, off-brand Charmander, and Blue Crocodile Guy. It felt different, the borders were cleaner, the holos were sparklier, and the booster packs were silver and serious. And in terms of the artwork, you had Lugia, who had those final boss vibes. Pichu looked like the least intimidating prequel of all time. And Feraligatr just looked like he'd done about 15 shoeies the night before. And while the art was beautiful, let's not ignore the chaos. The print quality was rough. If your Lugia came out centered and unscratched, you were either a wizard or you pulled it out of a booster pack in an alternate dimension. Grading companies still cry when they see Neo Genesis holos. That Lugia might be worth 5 figures now, but most of us just used it to stop the door closing. Neo Genesis wasn't just more cards, it was a statement. And next up, we head deeper into Johto, because there's still discoveries to be made. 6 months after Neo Genesis dropped, the TCG dropped Neo Discovery, a set that didn't bring new mechanics or game-breaking rules, just a lot of Pokemon who looked like they lived in your backyard. It was moody, it was weird, and it was the origin for most of modern TCG's favourite cards. You had Espeon, who was calm and psychic, Umbreon was edgy and mysterious, Tyranitar, just pure granite rage, Wobbuffet was like reverse psychology with 90 HP, and Sizer, scissors with the face, I guess, and just more unknowns than you even knew what to do with. And in terms of the pack art, I would honestly say this is some of the best looking pack art in the whole series. It just looked mysterious. You had the little symbols of unknown there. The Umbreon one needs to be in every serious collector's sealed collection. And it didn't even stop at the booster packs. Like, the booster box is beautiful. The theme decks are some of the better looking theme decks so far. I can't speak highly enough of how much this resonated with me as a child. Neo Discovery wasn't about power creep or innovation. It was more like it was a weird side quest. You didn't know where it was going, but it still gave XP, and you loved it. It really is a shame that there wasn't more people hoarding booster boxes at the time, because I would love to have a couple more of these in my collection. But that's enough about Neo Discovery. Next up, things get shiny, things get legendary, and Magikarp finally gets the respect that it deserves. Pokemon followed Neo Discovery up with Neo Revelation, a set that said dark caves, deep water, and mysterious glow-ups. Neo Revelation leaned hard into the mysterious ocean vibes.
Hello, how are you? I am under the water. Please help me. Here too much raining.
This was the first set in English to give us Shining Pokemon. Ultra rare cards where the Pokemon was a different colour and just slightly off. In this set, we had Shining Magikarp and Shining Gyarados, still two of the best looking cards in the whole hobby. And while the Shining Pokemon were a big draw to the whole expansion, the normal holos were still absolutely beautiful. 3 of my favourites being Ho-Oh, Celebi, and Houndoom. Still to this day, I'm not sure what was going through their heads when they were designing these cards, but in a weird way, they got it right. And another massive draw to the set was the legendary beasts, each radiating divine dog energy in Entei, Suicune, and Raikou. And while they didn't have the same argument potential as the original evolutions from Jungle, there was still a few arguments to be had. Neo Revelation marked a tonal shift in the game. The art became moodier, the Pokemon got more mythical, and the Shining cards introduced a new level of chase. Some kids pulled them, immediately went full Golem. Others didn't even believe they existed. Bro, there's no Shining Magikarp, stop lying. This was the first set that taught us that some Pokemon aren't just rare, they're weirdly, hauntingly special. And next up, we have Light Meets the Dark in Neo Destiny. By 2002, the Pokemon TCG had gone full philosophical. Neo Destiny dropped and said, what if your Pokemon had alignment? You weren't just battling, you were choosing the light or embracing the dark. This set introduced light and dark Pokemon, not just metaphorically, but actually printed on the cards. An example of this is shown in the Slowking. It's not your sleepy, happy-go-lucky Pokemon anymore. It's now got a sinister past with plans that you don't really want to know about. While the set had the light and dark Pokemon, the big hitters in the set came from the Shining Pokemon. First, you had Shining Charizard, the absolute GOAT. Edgy, untouchable. Shining Mewtwo looked like he just finished meditating and bench pressed a car. Shining Kabutops was a prehistoric ninja scythe wielder. And Shining Noctowl was just the biggest disappointment if you ever pulled one, let's be honest. But you also had Shining Steelix, who was a giant metal snake with the energy of a possessed train. Shining Raichu was a nice pull if you like crying over missed Charizards. Shining Celebi just looked like a giant lettuce leaf. And Shining Tyranitar, who obviously smoked about 3 packs a day. And while the Shinings definitely took a lot of the spotlight, we can't forget some of the normal holos in Dark Gengar, Dark Espeon, and Light Dragonite, who were amazing in their own rights. Neo Destiny closed out the Neo era like a glitter bomb at a philosophy class. The cards sparkled, the vibes were weird, and Slowbro was up to something sinister. But just as things started to get serious in the Neo sets, I hope you guys are ready for some fireworks because we're getting into base set 3.
Oh shit, here we go again.
In May 2002, Wizards of the Coast released Legendary Collection, a set that didn't really bring anything new to the table but still managed to stand out. There was no new Pokemon, no new mechanics, just a mashup of a bit of base set, Jungle, Fossil and Rocket, repackaged in a blue booster pack, then renamed and resold to us like it was something revolutionary. But honestly, we ate it up because those reverse holos made it feel like a party anyway. You had Charizard, who wasn't just powerful, but it was blinding. Beedrill finally got some attention, not for the stats, but for looking like it was printed on foil confetti. Even Rattata looked like it came with a light show and a fog machine. Collectors either loved them or blinked once and saw static for the week and absolutely hated them. You also had other regulars like Blastoise, Venusaur, and Gengar that all had that same treatment of that firework background that was so controversial at the time. And if I had to provide one word for the booster packs, I'd have to say exotic. That dark blue with all the Pokemon on the front just looked absolutely amazing. And that doubled for the booster box as well. You could imagine at the time being in the shop and seeing those booster packs just sitting there and you just want them. At the end of the day, let's be honest, Legendary Collection wasn't about innovation, it was about nostalgia. But the same can't be said for the next set, which was all about innovation. In 2002, Nintendo had a vision. Slide your card through a weird little attachment on your Game Boy Advance and boom, you can unlock secret attacks, mini-games, Pokédex entries, and even sound effects. It was called e-reader. It was futuristic, ambitious, and kind of magical. But not a lot of people used it. But that didn't stop the Pokemon TCG from committing hard. With Expedition, Wizards of the Coast launched the first ever e-reader compatible set, and the first step into a whole new phase of the game. This wasn't just a new set, it was a total reboot. Gone were the familiar designs of the base set era, in came bold new borders, vertical formatting, barcode strips running down the side that looked like you could scan your card at Woolies. It was modern, it was weird, and it was strangely gorgeous. In terms of the cards, Expedition had Gen 1 nostalgia mixed with a slick new presentation and the art slapped. Like, just look at Charizard. It looked like it just burst through a digital vortex. Blastoise stood like it was coaching a SWAT team. Venusaur had jungle warlord vibes. But you also had Gengar, who was hovering there, deciding whether he wanted to haunt you or hug you. Mewtwo looked like it had reached enlightenment. And Feraligatr was mid-chomp. The card backgrounds had a lot more depth too. Glowing skies, motion blurs, and even full scenic art in some cases. And the holos, they felt premium, polished, like a grown-up version of what came before. In terms of the booster packs, they were very flashy, featuring Charizard, Blastoise, Venusaur, and Feraligatr in a full-on action poses. They didn't just feel like card packs, they felt like you were buying into a new system. And the big change was obviously the e-reader features. Each card had scannable data, as I said, like Pokédex entries, attack animations, sound effects in theory. In practice, though, you needed an e-reader, you also needed a Game Boy Advance, you also needed the patience of a saint to try to get it to line up and scan properly. Most of us just looked at the barcode strip and said, cool, no idea what it does, and then sleeved it anyway. Next up, we have Aquapolis, where more tech, more scans, even more, wait, what does this even do? And some of the most jaw-dropping artwork ever printed on cardboard. I'll see you there. Let's talk about Aquapolis, one of the most underappreciated, misunderstood, and flat out stunning sets in the entire history of the Pokemon TCG. Released in January 2003, Aquapolis was part 2 of the short lived but legendary e reader era, and it quietly dropped at a strange time. The anime was shifting, the TCG was transitioning from Wizards of the Coast to Nintendo. Most kids didn't even understand what e reader completely meant, and because of that, this set slipped through the cracks. But for those who took the time to look, Aquapolis was a work of art. Aquapolis wasn't just a card set, it was a curated gallery of some of the most experimental and visually ambitious artwork the franchise has ever released. Like, just look at these cards. You had Umbreon up on the roof looking majestic. You had Arcanine running through the storm cliffs. Espeon was looking up at the sky like a constellation. Tentacruel was floating through the sea. And even the commons like Psydark and Slowbro look like concept art that we haven't seen before. But let's not forget about the Crystal Pokemon, because this set had 3. You had Crystal Kingdra, you had Crystal Lugia, and Crystal Nidoking, which to this day still blow me away every time I look at them in the binder. Aquapolis might not get the headlines, it might not break the auction records, but ask any seasoned collector or any artist in space and they'll tell you this set was special. It's timeless and it's slept on. And next up, we have the grand finale, the swan song of Wizards of the Coast. In May 2003, Wizards of the Coast released its final Pokemon set. There was no grand announcement, no victory lap, just one last breathtaking collection of cards called Skyridge. It wasn't just another expansion, it was the swan song. The last time Wizards would ever print a Pokemon card. You had Umbreon, who was silhouetted against a glowing moon, Vaporeon lounging by the waterfall like a spirit guardian, Gengar floating through the mist like a forgotten ghost, and then there were the crystals. In Skyridge, there were 6 crystal cards with Celebi, Charizard, Crobat, Golem, Ho-Oh, and Kabutops, all looking as beautiful as the ones from Aquapolis. By the time Skyridge launched, the handover was already happening. Wizards had lost the Pokemon license, Nintendo was stepping in, and for kids, Skyridge barely made a ripple. Packs were hard to find, print runs were short, and many didn't even realize it existed. But for those who did, Skyridge wasn't just the next set, it was the last one and the final echo from the Golden Age. Looking back, Skyridge represents the peak of the handcrafted card design. There was no shortcuts, no gimmicks, just world-class illustration, balanced design, and a quiet reverence for what the game had become. And that was it. Wizards of the Coast left the building. Nintendo took over, the EX era began, the layout changed, the feel changed, and the game moved forward. But for many collectors, including myself, Skyridge will always be the end of the golden era, and not just the final set for Wizards, but maybe the most beautiful set of all time. After Aquapolis, that is. And I just wanted to say a big thank you for everyone watching. I will be making a next video on the EX series coming up, so stay tuned for that over the next couple of weeks. Thank you.